Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Father Andrew Mattingly. I am a Catholic priest in Kansas City, Missouri, and this is a podcast where I post homilies and random other stuff that I might teach or speak about. Hope you find something useful and maybe even inspiring. God bless you.
Welcome, Father Mattingly, to our first of a new kind of episode on Padres Points. For those who don't know me, my name is Joe Ibarra, and I'm joined by Padre himself. And we're excited for this first of hopefully many new episodes.
Yeah, thanks for having me on to my own podcast, Joe. Appreciate it.
Anytime.
And I'm also super excited for this expansion, you could call it, of Padres Points, which has been going for, 5 years or so at this point. 90% of the content on it is just Sunday homilies that I put up there. But we're entering a new era, and we're copying everybody and their mom who is starting podcasts.
Yeah, I think everyone's first question is definitely going to be, why is the man with no email and no text messaging doubling down on podcasting? But maybe you can shed a bit of light into why exactly.
Yeah, I was bribed. So it's a great question. I'm still not completely sold on it, if I'm 100% honest. But yeah, I mean, the primary reason for expanding beyond Sunday homilies to some conversations and sort of this format that we're trying out for the first time today is just that I've realized in 10 years as a priest, and especially the last 2.5 years as a pastor, that 15 minutes on a Sunday doesn't give me enough time to tell or share everything that I want to share with my parishioners. That there's so many bits of formation, so many updates about parish projects, so many other things that I want to share with them, and there's simply not enough time to do that. Once a week for 15 minutes is not enough time. And one way that I remedied this over the past couple of years is some pastoral letters that I wrote to the parishioners here at Good Counsel. I think wrote 3 of them, maybe 3 or 4. And that's really helpful. And I plan on probably from time to time continuing to do that on specific topics. However, the podcast does provide, as much as I'm hesitant to engage yet another, digital technology, it does provide a unique format for forming parishioners and passing along information, namely the format of, the conversation, right? Which can be so formative and educational to listen in on a conversation. One of the reasons I think that podcasts are so popular today. That's kind of the genesis, I guess, of these new episodes. I'm not hoping to encourage my parishioners to spend even more time on the internet. But that being said, hopefully they can make use of blocks of time, when they're driving or something to work or whatever it may be, to receive some of the content of this podcast.
Yeah, no, it's great. I think even too, if on Sunday Mass, if they're listening to a homily of yours that they're not particularly interested in, maybe this would be a good option for them while they're in the pews if they want to tune out. No, that's a bad idea. As a parishioner myself, I can definitely say that, the Sunday homily is like a key aspect of the week as a parishioner to receive things. And obviously that's quite small. And during Advent and Lent, you usually have your catechesis talks. So those are great, but they're few and far between. So I'm excited for this opportunity. Maybe tell us a little bit about the kinds of topics or episodes that you're envisioning for this new platform.
Yeah, with this new little podcast studio that we have, and these fancy chairs and microphones, I'm planning on really 3 kinds of episodes. The simplest is just an update to parishioners. So if it wasn't clear before, this podcast is really meant for parishioners of Our Lady of Good Counsel. If other people find themselves tuning in that's obviously totally fine. Hopefully they can glean something, but for outside listeners, it may be helpful for them to know that from time to time, we certainly will be covering topics that they might not be as privy to. And so one of the categories that we're going to, or type of episodes that we'll have is just updates to parishioners explaining, I don't want to spend 10 minutes going over announcements, on Sundays.
You probably could, yeah.
I could very easily do that, kind of explaining this or that initiative or whatever. But that's the first thing we're going to use this podcast for. In fact, that'll be the topic today once we get done explaining why we're doing this. And then the second type of episode will be basically testimonies from parishioners. I'll have one or more parishioners on and basically ask them to share what Jesus has done in their life, either sort of the overarching story of their whole life or some specific vignette from their life where he's worked in a particular way, maybe recently, maybe a long time ago. Maybe it's a story of courage or mercy or, zeal, evangelization, whatever it may be. I'll have parishioners on to share stories. And this is not just for the inspiration of the general public, but again, primarily so that our parishioners can get to know other parishioners on a deeper level. That by sharing these stories, any parishioner that's listening will be like, oh, wow, I've had 5 conversations with Jimmy, out on the steps.
Sure.
But I never knew that about him, And so that's the second kind of episode. And then the final sort of episode will be more formational. So hopefully content that will be helpful for parishioners. And that'll kind of come in 2 forms. One will just be maybe you and I chatting, and I'll, in a slightly more direct way, offer, formative content on X, Y, or Z topic. Other formational episodes might be a larger group of parishioners, maybe 3 or 4 sitting around here, having a discussion about some particular topic.
Great.
But yeah, updates, testimonies, and formation.
Sounds great. I know that we're calling today's episode the State of the Union Address, which I really like. So maybe you could start us off with, what exactly is the state of the parish?
The state of the parish. Well, obviously, you could analyze that in a number of different ways. Financially, the state of the parish is stable. Thanks be to God. In terms of the structure of our buildings, we're doing all right.
They get tested from time to time.
Old buildings.
They're still here.
Yeah, we had some crazy plumbing issues with the Faustina building a couple weeks ago, and some trucks out digging giant holes in the sidewalk. But overall, the campus is doing okay. Obviously, the state of a parish primarily is going to refer to the state of the souls of individual parishioners, and that's something that, of course, is impossible to know perfectly in this life. I can give a general, guess or sense as to the state of the souls of my own parishioners and their relationship with God and so on, but I can never answer that fully. So I'm not going to attempt to sort of go down that route in answering this question.
You don't want to go like person by person.
Yeah,
just give an opinion.
Yeah, alphabetical order.
Yeah.
They're definitely, still in, the first of St. Teresa's.
That's right.
Mansions. That person might be in the 4th mansion. No. So primarily, I just want to go through today just a few kind of fun initial updates that most parishioners might not be aware of.
Sure.
And then primarily get into the vision casting process that began a couple years ago. But just some fun initial updates in the vocation realm. So we have 17 engaged couples that are going to get married next year in 2026, which, granted, some much larger parishes than us would say, oh, that'd be kind of low numbers. I know some parishes have 40, 50 weddings in a year. But for us, that's close to double what our average has been the last 3 or 4 years. And these are all like practicing parishioners, so couples that are here on Sundays. And so I'm spending a lot of my time one of the few things that I've chosen to not delegate much as a pastor is marriage prep, at least a good portion of it. And so I meet with every couple at least 4 times, possibly more. And so that's a large portion of my kind of time that I give to forming parishioners is marriage prep. And that's going to get jacked way up this next year with all these couples.
No doubt.
But that's very exciting. Also, we had a young man in the parish who entered seminary for his home diocese, not ours. He's from out of state, but he entered seminary and is in his first semester currently this fall. So that was very exciting. I was able to kind of walk with him a little bit and help him discern sort of the application. And we have 2 young men currently that I'm aware of who are high school seniors who are pretty seriously considering applying to seminary.
So exciting.
As well as one young adult woman in the parish in her early 20s who is currently in the process of applying to a religious order.
Wow.
And that one in particular is exciting for me because we've had a lot of young men over the past 15 years go to seminary, maybe averaging 1 per year even. But in that same time frame, I'm not aware of a single young woman from the parish that has,
No kidding.
has even like attempted to enter a religious order. I'm convinced the primary reason is just like lack of visibility, right? There's just every young
You can't
man.
discern what you don't know.
Yeah, exactly. So that's very exciting. And I've over the past year, I've led a couple of small groups, like these little 6-week small groups that were pioneered by the former vocation director in Tulsa, a guy named Father Michael Pratt, has these nice little, very simple 6-week small group sessions that you can go with young men or young women. And I've led one of each of those in the past year for some of our parishioners. And I think it's been really fruitful. This most recent one with a group of about 8 to 10 young adult women, I had the help of the 2 sisters that belong to the Society of Our Lady of the Trinity that have their convent maybe a mile away. So the Salt Sisters, as they're known. So it was great working with them. And we just got done a couple weeks ago with this little small group.
That's great to hear.
So yeah, that's some fun kind of vocations.
Yeah, that's probably a great litmus test on, like, we were joking that you can't exactly go through the souls of each parishioner, but yeah, fruitfulness of vocations has got to be pretty high on the list.
Yeah. Thanks be to God. Yeah, those things are going well. Just some, I like data and stats, and so maybe for some parishioners, they might be intrigued to know just general stats about the parish. We have close to 400 households, and we keep very accurate data on active households and keeping close track of people if they move away or leave the parish or people who join. So we're right just shy of 400 households in the parish, which totals a little bit over 1,000 individuals, and roughly half of those are children. 18 or under.
We'll be overtaken soon, probably.
Exactly, yeah. The adults might hold the majority currently, but probably in 6 months, that might not be the case. So yeah, about 1,000 souls in the parish currently. The last thing I was just going to say is that starting in February of this year, so almost a year ago now, began this extensive parish visitation. So some Catholics may know that bishops are required by canon law to visit every parish in their diocese at least once every 5 years. And that practice is very ancient in the church. When it comes to pastors, I haven't done extensive research on it, but I've never run across any history of anything canonically binding on pastors to like visit all of their parishioners according to a certain cycle of years or anything. But you do find this trend mentioned a lot at various points in church history of pastors visiting the houses of their parishioners for a variety of reasons. And so when I became pastor 2.5 years ago here, and I was reading through all of the canonical information about the duties of a pastor, and there are a few canons in canon law that give these sort of laundry lists of he needs to do this and this and this and this and this. And one of them said, a pastor is to get to know his parishioners, therefore he is to visit them.
Wow.
And so it doesn't give like a specific requirement of like he has to visit them every parishioner on a 5-year cycle or something, but I found it really fascinating that it presumed that the only real way that a pastor was going to be able to really know his parishioners is by visiting them. And so came up with this complicated system of, dividing up the parish into 8 waves. It's going to take about 3 years for me to visit everybody. Some visits are here at the rectory. Some visits are in people's homes. But I've probably visited with about 50 households so far. So
It's pretty good.
Yeah, about 1/8 of the parish. And it's been one of the best decisions I've ever made as a priest.
Really? Tell me about it.
I mean, like I realize in doing these visits, and I sort of have tried to preface it with families by saying, this is for me to get to know you and for you to share with me whatever you want to about your life. There's no real agenda other than that. And I'll sometimes prompt them saying, I'm interested in everything from family history to specific episodes you remember from childhood, happy memories, sad memories, challenges you faced, big crosses in life, small crosses, funny stories that you remember. I mean, literally anything. And then I just kind of leave it to them to, to talk about their life. One thing I've realized so far is that I think very few people have ever been given like 30 minutes or 60 minutes to just like talk about their life history.
Yeah, and to start from the beginning.
Yeah.
If they want.
Like you never do that, right? I mean, when you're hanging out with friends or family or something, you might recall a certain episode or things like that. But to give sort of a monologue, a kind of narrative of your whole life is, I'm finding that not only is this new for me as the listener, but it's also, of course, very new for most of the parishioners who are kind of sharing this sort of life narrative.
Yeah, what a unique exercise. And for you as a pastor to be able to, get to know one of your parishioners in that way, it's pretty unique.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. I mean, even people who I've had maybe multiple long-ish conversations with prior to the visitation, after I get done with, this 1 to 2 hour, usually they're more on the actually 2 to 3 hour side. Once we get done with this conversation, I realize, man, like I've interacted with you maybe a bunch of times, but I didn't really know you at all. And now, I mean, it's barely, 2 to 3 hours, right? It's just scratching the surface on someone's
True.
life.
So true.
But at least it's helping me to start to get a feel. One thing that I've come to realize, and this sounds a bit cliche, but it's just how absolutely unique everyone is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, before going on the visitation, I might have had these like mental categories for parishioners. Oh, like it's the young married parishioners, and it's the single young adult parishioners, and the older parishioners, and so on. And kind of thinking in these categories. And sometimes you have to do that just to figure out a problem or something. Or
and practically you can't hold in your mind like everyone's story.
Right.
So I think day to day you have to do that. But it's great to be able to break that mold.
Yeah. And I mean, hearing someone's, we've all heard phrases along the lines, oh, everyone's so unique. Every soul is unrepeatable. And I mean, it's so true. But when you sit down and hear someone's life story for a couple hours, you just realize how insanely different everyone is. Like like nobody's life experience is even remotely similar. Like even I'm starting to realize, siblings that grow up in the same family that might even be close in age, how they experience the same event might be wildly different, and their perspectives on this or that, this has given me a really a much deeper appreciation for the uniqueness of everyone. Another theme that seems to have come up in the Visitation is not per se with everybody, but for a large majority, there seems to be sort of one rather large cross that they've had to bear at some point in their life, if they're not currently bearing it. So that's something I've been very privileged to be let in on in many cases. I've just been very humbled by the vulnerability of so many people to share so much about their life, so many things that are pretty personal, and so the Parish Visitation has been one of the most enjoyable, fruitful things that I've done as a priest, like by a long shot.
That's so good to hear. I think most people's first question would be, how do you move up in the schedule? Is there a... Just kidding. I know that,
Yeah, there's this button on the parish website to increase your tithe.
It's like a lottery, yeah. Oh, even better. I like the way you're thinking. No, that's great. And I remember about a year ago when you made the announcement in one of your pastoral letters that you weren't going to be using email, amongst other things, that you were hoping to replace certain communication with a higher one. And it seems like this visitation process has been, one of the higher opportunities. And it sounds like, that's been paying off.
Yeah, it's been super fruitful. And there's a number of other projects we have in the works right now in terms of just updating parishioners on things. 3 or 4 quite substantial ones, I would say, that are between 30% and 80% baked, you might say.
Sure.
And which I can't really say too much about right now, but hopefully most, if not all of them, will come to fruition in some way, shape, or form in 2026. And so, I'm hopeful that next year in particular we'll have a lot of very interesting, hopefully very exciting updates to share with parishioners.
Great. Well, maybe we can leave it there as a tease to come back in 6 months or so. I know the other major item you wanted to talk about was the vision casting. Maybe before jumping right into the vision casting, if you want to speak a little bit about like the purpose behind that and how even the decision to cast a vision was even made.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll kind of give maybe some of the introductory history first, and then answer the question of like why even bother with a vision casting process. So I became pastor here in summer of 2023, so 2.5 years ago, and pretty much immediately organized a group of about 10 parishioners that came to be known fondly among ourselves as the Supreme Team.
Yeah, sounds like a very humble group. Great.
That's right. Everyone has reached the highest levels of humility. And we spent that fall of 2023. First of all, I outlined for everybody what the church says are the purposes or identity of a parish, as well as a shrine, since we happen to have this sort of double identity here at Good Counsel of being a normal parish, but also a diocesan shrine. And so I laid that out for the Supreme Team, like, here's what the church says are the purposes of a parish and a shrine. And then we sort of worked through, and under each of these categories came up with a number of subcategories that were going to eventually become kind of the areas of focus for the vision. And they usually say, when you're trying to set goals, like 5 or 10 year goals, you read all this material out there from consultants and stuff. They're like, don't do more than like 3,
Yeah. Focus on 1 or 2, maybe 3.
Yeah. And so following that, we decided to focus on 14.
Yeah, makes total sense. Brilliant. How could that go wrong?
So I'll get more into that in a second. But to the question of like why even bother with this, because I think it's a very reasonable objection that a lot of people would make who've seen like parish or diocesan, I don't know, goal setting endeavors. And they're just like, look, we just waste all this time to come up with goals. We put them in a binder, goes on the shelf.
And that's it.
And like nothing ever comes of it. Like it's just a big waste of time, you know? And part of me like really sympathizes with that perspective. But at the same time, I think there's a place for it, but I don't think it's often done well. I'm not saying that our vision casting was by any means perfectly discerned, nor are we perfectly executing it.
Right.
But I would say one of the big reasons why maybe in our current culture, both like secular culture and within the church, that casting a vision, if you're in a position of leadership with like explicit goals, whether that's a school, a parish, a diocese, one of the reasons I think it's important now, and it may not have been as important, let's say 300 years ago, is that when you live in a society that is very stable and not a whole lot changes from generation to generation, think of agrarian culture 300 years ago, like rural France or something. Like pretty much your life is whatever your parents' life was. The life of the parish is more or less identical to what it was 2 generations back.
Interesting.
There's just so much stability that everyone kind of, you know who you are, you know what community you belong to, you know your purpose in life. You don't really have to sit down at a table and sort of like set goals.
Yeah. What are we going to do in the next 5 years?
Yeah.
The same thing we've been doing the last 50 years.
Yeah, exactly. But I think when you enter a society like ours is today that's so unstable, there's such a lack of rootedness. People move around all the time. People face decision paralysis about so many things, whether that's their vocation, what cereal to buy at the supermarket. There's just so many options all the time that unless you start clarifying, these are the lanes that we're going to focus our time and energy on, you can just drift and get lost in a sea of options. And that goes for a parishioner, it goes for a pastor, it goes for a bishop, it goes for the head of a family, a principal of a school, right? They're just, it's just chaotic. And so I think in our current day, it's very important for those in leadership positions to cast clear visions with clear priorities. Whereas it may have been a waste of time 300 years ago. So that's kind of an initial stab, I would say.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense. I would say, I don't know how in detail you want to get, but with that in mind, how would you maybe like set the table for, getting it into a bit more of the specifics of, for like starting there and how important it is to discern a bit more intentionally. I know you explained the 4 purposes of a parish, or 3 purposes of a parish, 1 extra aspect of the shrine. How do you go from there to the full vision casting?
Yeah, so jumping back into our parish vision casting process. So we had the Supreme team in the fall of 23, and I explained to them that the church basically envisions 3 purposes to a parish. The first and highest is divine worship, that the primary function or activity of a parish is the worship of God in the Holy Mass primarily. If a parish is lucky enough to have the divine office, the liturgy of the hours, that would also be a component, but primarily this means the Mass. So this is the highest and most important activity of a parish. So that's sort of ordered from us towards God. The second and third activities or purposes of a parish would be more ordered towards God to the parishioners, so sort of an arrow in the other direction. The sanctification of the people in the pews would be number 1. And then the parish's role kind of communally of sanctifying the non-faithful, of basically reaching those who are not Catholic, would be the second. So basically the three activities or purposes of a parish would be, number one, divine worship, number two, sanctifying the people in the pews, and number three, evangelizing and reaching the people who are not in the pews, non-Catholics. And then, of course, with us being a shrine, we also have that sort of piece. So if you can envision kind of four columns of divine worship, sanctifying the faithful, sanctifying the non-faithful, and then the shrine, that's what the Supreme Team was kind of looking at. And basically, we discerned, okay, what are the big areas of focus in each of these four columns that we want to prioritize over the next 5 to 10 years. So we came up with 14, like I said, which I never would have attempted something on such a large scale unless I believed that here at the parish we had enough parishioners that were well-grounded enough in the faith and that loved Jesus enough, sort of this combo of like holiness and wisdom. Like unless we had enough parishioners to populate 14 kind of discernment groups, I never would have attempted something this large. But I do think we have that many parishioners that are capable of entering a sort of depth of discernment. And so just kind of briefly walking through, in the category of divine worship, the two areas of focus that we settled on were the beautification of the church building, and sacred music. So those were the two there. The areas of focus under sanctifying the faithful in the pews was the most populated column. So the two simplest were a parish school, so kind of seeing the need for a grade school. The second was trying to bring an order of religious sisters to the parish. So that's a pretty straightforward goal. The third, fourth, and fifth areas of focus all had to do with just the general like conversion and formation of parishioners, but in different categories. So there was one that was just kind of generic conversion and formation of adults, one for youth, and one for married couples. And then the last components in this sanctification of the faithful in the pews was goals having to do with deepening the parish's community life. And then this last one, maybe one of the most unique ones in the whole vision casting process, is building what we just called a parish economy, this sort of marketplace or exchange of goods and talents, and the creation possibly of like alternate structures within the parish that will help people on the material side of things. So yeah, those are all sort of areas of focus.
Wow. That list kind of packs a punch.
Yeah.
You probably could have just picked one of those and that would have been worth a year's worth of work.
Yeah. Sometimes when I was trying to explain this whole thing to people early on, I would say, yeah, the school could have been the whole project by itself. as we've learned, trying to start a school is rather complicated and a lot of work. But yeah, so that's column number 2. Column 3 of sanctifying, the people outside the pews, the non-faithful. We had basically 2 goals. Make sure I don't forget them here. One was our areas of focus. One was just kind of trying to have our OCIA program here explode over the next 5 to 10 years, which I think with God's grace and the right initiatives in place could happen. And then the second area of focus was just how the parish could have an impact on our immediate geographical vicinity, like this part of Kansas City. And then finally, we had a few areas of focus in our identity as a shrine. One was just increasing confession times. Canon law says that shrines should be places where spiritual means of growth are more available, particularly preaching and the sacraments should be maybe more available than in your average location.
Okay, great.
So one of the goals is just increasing confession times here the second was how the shrine could have an impact on the wider Catholic community in the region. Because shrines, again, if you imagine a parish as kind of a lighthouse that should spread light to its sort of immediate vicinity, a shrine should have a slightly brighter lighthouse, you might say, perhaps in a different way, but it should have a certain geographical reach that perhaps goes beyond that of a normal parish.
Yeah, it doesn't have the parish bounds per se.
Exactly.
In that kind of sense.
Exactly. So increasing confessions, discerning how the shrine could have a wider impact on the Catholic Church. And then the last area of focus was how we could increase the shrine as a place of real pilgrimage. Like to get people, maybe a couple times a year, I'll meet somebody like in the back of Good Counsel. This happened a few years ago. It's kind of funny. There was a few people back there, and I happened to be in the church. It was maybe after a daily mass or something. And they were like, "Excuse me, we have a question." I'm like, "Sure, what's your question?" They said, "Where's the shrine?" Like, you're standing in it.
You're in it.
This is it. So
yeah, that's a fair question.
Yeah. So just kind of how we could make it more a place of pilgrimage. That's a long answer to give kind of this 14 areas of focus. And then I put together 14 different like brainstorm groups or discernment groups. Each group had anywhere from 3 to 7 parishioners. And basically they met anywhere from 5 to 15 times throughout 2024 to come up with 3 to 5 goals over the next 5 or 10 years. And we had a very structured process for like, here's how the language of a goal needs to be set so that it's defined enough that we can actually accomplish it. And so by the end of last year, by the end of 2024, we had this incredibly long list of goals that it's like 60 some goals.
Yeah, it's a big list.
That we're going to try and accomplish over the next 5 to 10 years. And some goals were like 1-year goals. Some were 2 or 3 year goals. There's only a handful of 10-year goals. And some of them we've already accomplished. Many of them we've started progress on. But it's a long, slow process.
Yeah. I know you said we probably spent too much time on this, which is true, but also probably takes a while to talk about the 14 different groups. Maybe last thing on this is, how would you say either that discernment process went, and then maybe in follow-up to that, how is the executing going of such a magnanimous project? What's that been like?
Yeah, I think the discernment process in 2024, as those 14 groups were meeting and kind of coming up with goals, I think it was pretty fruitful. I was part of at least half of the groups. You were part of many of the others, and I think it went well. One of the reasons I have confidence in the results of the vision casting is that we had every group commit to kind of a stable structure of prayer. So each group's work and discernment was constantly being supported by the prayer of that group, really begging God to help us come up with goals that are in line with his will. Like from the outset, I remember one of the specific meetings of the Supreme team, one of the guys said something along the lines of, shouldn't the goal of the vision casting be to like discover God's will rather than like craft our own magnificent plan?
Yeah, it's a great way to say it.
And when he said that, obviously all of us were just like, yeah, that's it.
maybe that's what we're working on here.
That's what we're trying to do. So to facilitate this as a sort of discovery process, obviously a proactive one, God wants us to exercise our own mind and gifts to come up with these goals. But I think the discernment process for each group went pretty well, all things being considered. And then since then, we've started executing different goals starting this year in 2025. And I'll just give a couple quick examples. One with bringing an order of religious sisters to the parish. I've crafted 3 different letters and sent them to superiors of women's religious orders, and Bishop Johnston graciously attached a cover letter to each of those, since most, orders of good women religious probably get requests all the time. And so the likelihood that they're going to pay attention to some random pastor asking for them to come to his parish.
Assuming they don't listen to Padre's points.
Well, that's fair. Yeah.
So, but no, okay, so Bishop Johnston had a bit more gravitas to the appeal.
Exactly. So I'm very grateful for him to attach those. Unfortunately, the first 3 orders, they all responded, which I was grateful for, but they all said no. So, but that particular vision casting group came up with like 12 orders. We researched like close to 200 and came up with 12 orders that we thought would maybe be the best fit for good counsel. And so I haven't gotten around to crafting the next 3 letters yet, but we'll do that hopefully in the next couple months.
Great.
However, 2 of the orders, though, even though they said no, for the time being, they will be making visits to the parish next year for different things. That'll help to just have some face time and some exposure to women's religious.
That's wonderful.
They'll be leading a 1-day mission before Lent. One of the orders will, a couple sisters. And then in the summertime, one of the other orders is going to come to lead a sort of roughly week-long like youth camp for kids in the parish. So I'm excited about that. So as religious sisters, another project, like I said, was a parish school. And we'll probably have future episodes on the topic of education and schooling and so on. Won't say too much now, but the main thing is that after 8 or 9 months of discussion and discernment, eventually decided that the school that we presumed at the start would be a normal parochial school would actually be independent. So I'll spare all the details and explanations of why that's the case for now, because it would take us down a rabbit hole. But yeah, so that project is still moving forward, but outside of the bounds of the parish at this point, and outside of the bounds of this vision casting conversation. Another thing is that a lot of the 60 some odd goals in different groups touched on the physical campus layout of our parish. And so that's something where we've been in multiple conversations with the diocese and the bishop over the past 6-8 months about various proposals for next steps to address a possible reconfiguration, beautification, improvement of the general parish campus.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm sure as parishioners are listening to this long list, they're like, where's the goal of getting more room in the church? They're like, I'm glad to hear about all these, pilgrims to the shrine and parish economy. Those sound good, but the church has been full, which is great. But I think it's good to share that, you're aware and actively working on it.
Yeah, I'm definitely aware that our 2 Sunday masses are most Sundays quite packed. That being said, I have talked to many people do appreciate that. They say, it gives it a different feel, when you show up to a full church. Some parents with little kids do also say that it helps because you have extra barriers from your kids, like escaping from the pew. So
yeah, nothing's more dangerous than a free line to the aisle. You're just asking for trouble.
That's right. So there are some advantages certainly to having a packed church, but that can only last so long if a parish continues to grow. And so I'm very aware of the space constraints in the church, and we're actively working on that. So those are some of the bigger ones, like school, campus plan, etc. But maybe an example of one of the smaller goals from a particular group would be one that I mentioned in the homily this past Sunday, namely that for all the adults in the parish, and I kind of expanded this recently to everyone in the parish 13 or over, a goal is that within the next year or two, that everyone will have committed to what we'll call kind of a baseline plan of life. And for those listening who maybe aren't familiar with that term, sometimes it goes by the name rule of life, but it's basically a set of like norms or commitments that someone has made, sort of practices, you might say, that they try and live out on a daily or a weekly or a monthly or a yearly basis. So there are dozens of things that could be norms in a plan of life. But in this particular vision casting group, we discerned 4 norms that we hope would be, and these are daily, that we hope would be like a baseline for everyone in the parish by a year or 2 from now. Not that they're going to necessarily be like successful every single day in doing them, but simply that by a year or 2 from now, every parishioner will have made the commitment.
Right.
They will have been sold on the idea that, okay, I see the importance of a plan of life, and I'm going to commit myself to these 4 things as kind of a starting point. And so that was some sort of daily Marian devotion. Number 1, that's essential for the Christian life. That could be as small as a memorare before going to bed, or as big as a rosary, let's say. But some sort of daily Marian devotion. The second was some sort of daily contact with Scripture. Again, that could take a variety of shapes. The third was a daily examination of conscience. And the fourth was, at minimum, 15 minutes of silent prayer each day, which, again, that also could take many shapes, Lectio Divina with Scripture, or just a normal conversation with the Lord, or journal, prayer journaling, but 15 minutes of silence with the Lord. And so that's an example of maybe one of these, it's still a big goal in the sense of the impact that it would have.
Right.
But in terms of the amount of work that it'll take to pull it off, maybe smaller, right? So, but yeah, that's an example of some. Obviously, we're not going to run through all 60 some odd goals here, but probably in future episodes of the podcast, we'll begin unpacking a lot of those as they get hopefully accomplished in the coming years at the parish.
That sounds great. No, I think that's a good, at least overview of the vision casting process as a whole, and then some maybe more specific insights so that parishioners can kind of see that the ball is in fact rolling. Any other maybe final thoughts? I know that you mentioned you've been the pastor for 2.5 years. There's probably a lot of updates that we could have shared, but we've already probably talked too long. Any maybe concluding thoughts in terms of updates, or where you might like to end things and talk about what's to come.
Yeah, maybe one small practical thing regarding the school, because I know we had told the parish back in the spring that we would have another update regarding the school in the fall. So I more or less just gave that update, which is that the school is going to be independent. It does have a name. The Loretto School will be the name of the school. Loretto with 2 T's. And so for anybody listening that is particularly interested in the school, they can email, contact@thelorettoschool.org.
Yep.
Contact. We'll put it in I hear podcasters talk about show notes, so we'll put it in
Yeah, neither of us are quite sure what that is, but it'll be there.
We'll put it in the show notes. But so that's just kind of an update, for people that want more info on that, or if they want to donate millions of dollars to the new school, they can email that email.
Great, that'd be awesome.
Other than that, I think I'm just really excited for this new kind of format to convey things to the parish, and I hope our parishioners find it helpful.
That's great. I know I got to work with you a little bit on some of your previous pastoral letters, and I can say that we got through a lot more information in our short time here than and in a shorter fashion than we did with those. Like you said, there's definitely a place for them. But I'm grateful to have some time with you to share these updates with the parish. And like you said, a few different topics will be on the way, a few more updates on the way. And I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Thanks, Joe.
Yep. Thanks, Father.